Hey y'all, I'm Sir Pinkbeard, and for the longest time I hated budgeting my money. It always felt constricting and like I didn't have real control over my finances. And recently I realized that that was because I was trying to budget based on how other people want me to, rather than how I want to spend my own money. And ultimately that led to me not wanting to stick to my budget very long and then throwing my budget out the window and forgetting that I even had one. But now I know better. So I'm going to answer 3 questions in this video. 1, what is a zero balance budget? 2, how should you structure your budget? And 3, what kind of tools can you use to budget effectively? Now, before we can get into how to structure your budget and how to set everything up, we have to talk about the zero balance budget. And you need to understand that a budget is nothing more than a plan for how you spend your money, which is why Ramit, Sethi, author of I Will Teach You to Be Rich, calls it an active spending plan. It's not this end-all document that controls the way you live. It's a plan that you have put in place for how you are going to spend your money. Now, the point of a zero balance budget is to get your incoming cash, your paychecks, savings, dividends, all of that, to be equal to your outgoing cash, which is bills, expenses, savings, investing, so that way the total sum is equal to 0. Which means that if you get to the end of your budget and you've documented everything out and you still have money left over, whether it's $5 or $500, you're not done. So you have to come up with a place to put that extra money, whether it's into a shoe fund or into a pizza fund. It doesn't matter as long as you put that money somewhere, because in order to have an effective zero balance budget, you have to make sure that there is no money left over at the end of the month, even if you're saving it. Okay, so we're building a zero balance budget, but what goes on a zero balance budget? What are the categories of things that we need to make sure that we are covering all of life's expenses and being able to live the life that we want to live? Well, there are 3 categories, and I call them the requirements, the obligations, and the wants. So, what are the requirements for your budget? Well, those are things that you literally cannot live without. Things like food and water, shelter, utilities, and some sort of transportation to get to and from work. Though the case can be made that you should also have internet on that list of requirements in today's modern age, but that's about it. Now, the requirements will be the biggest portion of your bills, or at least it should be the biggest portion of your bills over your lifetime. And there are some general rules for what you can expect to pay for those requirements. For example, in our parents' time, in the time of boomers and Gen X, there was this understanding that you wouldn't pay more than 30% of your monthly income for living expenses. But given the fact that the housing market has dramatically increased its pricing over the last couple of decades, I have found that you're more than likely going to spend about 50% of your income on living expenses, things like rent and utilities, and really that's it. Rent and utilities are going to take up about 50% of your income these days, and that's terrible, but that's kind of the way it is. The next expense on that list is food, and if you're cooking at home, which you don't have to do because this is your budget and I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, you can expect to spend about $50 on food a week for a single person. About $200 a month will be used on food expenses for yourself. Now, you can buy really fancy things or buy really cheap items and kind of move that number around a bit. But if you're cooking at home, you can expect to spend about $200 a month on just your food expenses. And then we come to utilities and transportation. Now, this is the biggest variable expense in your requirements because it changes basically on what type of home you live in and where you actually live for your transportation costs. Because if you live in a city or suburbia or the outskirts of a city that has good public transportation, you might not need to have 2 cars for your household. You might be able to share 1 car and then commute on public transport, which will be cheaper than having 2 cars and both having to drive to work and then pay the insurance on both of those cars. But like I said, that's going to vary greatly depending on where you want to live and what city and location you're living in. Now, all of that said, these are going to be the biggest expenses on your budget because they are what's going to help keep you alive. But depending on the type of lifestyle you want to live, you can do some things to drastically change these expenses and their costs. For example, there is an entire community blooming on Reddit for people who are buying vans and renovating them into homes and then just traveling around wherever. There's also a push in the city which I reside for micro apartments for people who don't really want a big space but still want to live in the city and be close to work. And a lot of these factors based on where you want to live and how big a home you want to have and what type of car you want to drive and where you live overall will affect these expenses. So figure out what lifestyle works best for you and then plan your budget accordingly. So now that we've covered the requirements, let's talk about the obligations for your budget. Now, as I see it, there are really 3 categories of obligation: savings, debt, and investing for your future/retirement. Now, once you've paid your requirements, we want to go ahead and pay ourselves first. So, this will not only allow you to build your emergency fund, but it will also allow you to actually feel like you're taking home some of the money that you went and worked hard for the last 2 weeks for. Because you worked hard for your money, and you want to be able to keep some of it and not just be left at the end of the pay period with an empty wallet or an empty bank account. Now, if you don't have knowledge of how the emergency fund works, you can click on the card right here, and it will take you to the video that I have done on emergency funds and how to set that up and everything you need to know, so that way you can feel more financial peace in your life. So now that you've set aside money in your emergency fund and you've paid yourself a little bit extra just to enjoy the fruits of your labor, you want to make sure that you're setting money aside for future expenses rather than just relying on your emergency fund. So things like car maintenance, because you know you're going to need to change your oil every 3,000 to 7,000 miles depending on what type of oil you have. And things like birthday or holiday presents, because you know eventually you're going to have to pay for that. So you should set aside a little bit of money every paycheck to help cover those expenses. And once you've put aside money for all of those things, it's time to look at the second obligation, debt. Now, ultimately, the goal is not to have any debt, which I know seems like a pipe dream for a lot of people with student loan debt and credit card debt and mortgages. There's a lot of ways to get into debt. And there will be a future video coming out that talks about how to get out of debt and the ways that I did it and the other possible way that you can do it depending on how you think. But for the purpose of this video, you should know that basically on your budget, you need to write down who you owe money to and what the minimum payments for your debt is. Now, once you are out of debt, you will have money that is free to use to invest for your future and for retirement. So for now, just know that what we're going to do is try to reach a point where we are investing 15 to 20% of our monthly income into investing for retirement and our future. But since we're not there yet, we're not going to talk about how we invest or where we should invest or any of those topics. So if you want to stick around for that video, go ahead, smash the like button just to let me know I did a good job, and then subscribe so that way you can get a notification when I produce that video. Okay, so we've talked about the requirements and we've talked about the obligations, but now it's time for the fun part of our budget, the wants. Because if you are out of debt, and you are investing for your future and retirement, this next section is all about what you want and how you want to spend your money. So, what do you want to spend your money on? Do you want to buy ridiculously fancy shoes or clothing? Or do you want to take extreme vacations once or twice a year? Or maybe you want to eat delicious foods. or learn how to cook and get really good cooking utensils. This is the thing, it doesn't matter what you want, because whatever you want, now you have the freedom to spend your money there. So on your budget, you can just put down, hey, I'm gonna put the rest of this money that I have every month into this fund, whether it's vacations or buying cool toys or spending money on red bottom heels, which my wife would love. Or you could spend your money like a student that I used to teach and just buy the latest fashion trend. I mean, dude spent like hundreds of dollars on Supreme merch when it was the big thing. And I wouldn't have spent my money that way, but that's the point. Because this budget is about the way that you want to spend your money, not about trying to spend your money the way someone else wants to. Because you've saved for retirement, you've created an emergency fund, you are out of debt, and the rest is freedom. We've talked about a zero balance budget, we've talked about the structure of a budget and what you need and how you should order it, but let's talk about one of the quickest free tools that you can use to actually build your budget. Now, there are a ton of free budgeting tools out there. The biggest one is Mint. But if you're just starting out, there's no reason to get that complicated or get an app for it. I find it is really the best way to get your finances under control if you manually work on a budget, which is why I recommend using Google Drive's budget template. Okay, so in order to use this tool, all you need is a Gmail account. Now, if you have a Gmail account, you just go into your Google Drive, click on the New button, go to Sheets, and then From a Template. Once you're here, one of the first templates you'll see is this monthly budget. Go ahead and click on that, and it will create for you a monthly budget. All right, so now that we've created the budget template, I just want to point out that there is a note that says, hey, only edit the highlighted cells. So in order to use this budget effectively, what we need to do is first put in our starting balance. Now this can just be whatever your checking account balance is immediately. So by default, it's $1,000, but I keep about $2,000 in my checkbook just in case. So we're gonna start out with $2,000. From here, let's just go down and we'll see that we have expenses and income. Now, these expenses by default are pretty close, and if we're honest, they do cover the requirements and the obligations, but they put it in a bit of a different order. And then for income, we have the option to put in paychecks and savings and bonuses and interest and any of the other expected income that we are going to receive this month. Let's go to paycheck and let's say how much money are we going to bring home this month? Well, let's say $3,000. And then we can go ahead and change the bonus section to YouTube payments. And let's just say $50 because that's all I make at this point in time a month. Now, a couple of things have happened. We've put in and changed the values for the paychecks that we're going to receive this month and an additional money that we can count on to be delivered into our checking account. From here, you'll notice that there is a planned, an actual, and a difference. The planned is how much you expect to have come into your checking account. The actual, though, is linked up to the second tab down here at the bottom for transactions. So when we click on transactions, we can see we have an expense column and an income column. So when you actually do get paid, you will put the date in, the amount, the description if you want one, and then you can choose your category. And if we click on that, you can see we have paycheck, savings, YouTube payment, interest, other, or custom, which is basically all of these options here. So when you put in, hey, I expect to get $3,000, but your transactions only read that you've earned $1,500, you are going to see that there is a negative difference of $1,500. The same with the YouTube payment, because there isn't a transaction saying that we received money yet. We're just saying we have negative $50 for income. Now for expenses, they basically work the same way. You put in how much you expect to spend on food, gifts, health and medical, transportation, rent, all of that. And then with your transactions, you put in the category and the amount, and it will go ahead and automatically update here to let you know, hey, you either spent too much this month or spent not enough
this month. But these options don't really go in the order that I have structured my budget and I've explained to you. So let me change those up. Okay, so I have fixed the expenses to line up with the order that I was talking about. So we've got home, food, utilities, and transportation. These are the 4 requirements, and they are also the biggest chunk of my expenses. Next, we have savings for emergency fund and personal savings. And then we have the savings for things that we know are coming up. Things like car maintenance, car insurance, dog expenses, cell phone bills, internet, Netflix, Amazon Prime, if you happen to have these things, a Costco membership, Christmas gifts, clothing, and toiletries. And then we have our debt, things like Chase payments or credit card payments or student loan debt. And then after all of that, we have house savings or vacation or whatever else you want for you, whatever you want to spend your money on. This is that last section. And the goal of a zero balance budget is to line up your planned expenses with your planned income. And once you've mapped out this plan, then you have to simply write down what you spent your money on and how much you actually got paid and hope they balance out. Now, the first time you do this, you're not going to actually balance out. You're going to either be above or below with the actual values. But if you do this month after month, after about 3 to 5 months, you should have a really good understanding of what your bills are and how much they are going to cost. And then each month, you can adjust your bills accordingly. Hey guys, I'm Sir Pinkbeard, and thanks for watching to the end of the video. I hope this has helped you get a better hold on your finances and moves you one step closer to financial freedom. If you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments below or by smashing that like button. And then, if you would, share this with other people, because I don't want anybody to remain poor, because getting and building wealth is way too easy to keep to yourself.